There comes a moment in life when you realize you're not lacking money. You're drowning in noise. Noise telling you that your worth depends on what you own, that your peace depends on your balance, that your future is trapped in numbers that rise and fall as if they were the pulse of your existence. And without noticing, you build an invisible altar where money isn't a tool, it becomes a judge. A judge deciding whether you deserve rest, whether you're allowed to enjoy, whether you're allowed to breathe. But centuries ago, 2,000 years back, a group of men walked through the world with a very different kind of wealth. No cards, no bank accounts, no modern obsession with measuring everything. And yet, they were freer than most of us today, because they understood something almost no one remembers now. Money can buy almost anything except the owner of your mind. And it's in forgetting that truth where our slavery begins. If you pause for a moment, you'll notice it's never money itself that makes you suffer. It's what you believe it means. It's the fear of losing it, the fear of not having enough, the comparison with others, the ghost of a lifestyle you never really asked for but still chase. And while you run after numbers that never stop moving, your life begins to orbit around an axis controlled not by your soul, but by your anxiety. That's where the Stoics shout across time, "You are free the moment money stops defining you." But that line isn't pretty. It's brutal, because reaching that point requires facing the part of you that clings, that desires, that demands, that fears, the part that builds prisons, disguised as ambition, disguised as, "I need more." 18. Imagine, just for a moment, that everything you own disappears, not to scare you, but to show you something. What remains? Which part of you stands firm? Which part of you is still you, without accessories, without purchases, without attachments, without masks? The Stoics practiced this exercise every single day, not out of morbid curiosity, but as training. To remember that anything you can lose without being destroyed was never truly part of your essence. And money, as valuable as it is, was never essence for them. It was an instrument, a rope, a means, never a master, never a god. The problem isn't how much you earn. The problem is how much it controls you, how much it dictates your decisions, your relationships, your dignity, your ability to be present. Because money has a subtle trick. It can give you physical freedom while chaining you internally. It can force you to work where you don't want to stay silent when you shouldn't, to maintain appearances that exhaust you, to pretend to live a life that isn't yours. And in that exact place, your soul starts whispering that something is wrong, because you weren't born to be a well-paid slave. You were born to think clearly, to choose freely, to live intentionally, and none of those things can be bought. That is why this episode exists, because somewhere along your life, money stopped being a resource and became a symbol. And that symbol began dictating your value, your fears, your sacrifices. But today, right here, we are going to dismantle that illusion from the root. We're going to walk through the 12 lessons the Stoics used so they would never become slaves of money. And they didn't achieve this by being rich. They achieved it by being conscious, by understanding that whoever dominates their desires dominates their destiny, that nothing external has the right to govern the soul, not pleasure, not opinion, not fortune. So breathe, drop your shoulders, and set aside, just for a moment, everything that weighs on you. Your debts, your fears, your plans, your expectations, your crushing goals. Today we're not here to talk about numbers. We're here to talk about freedom. A freedom that only appears when you understand the rightful place money should occupy in your life. Beneath you, never above you. Because the day you truly understand that, life stops feeling like an endless race and begins to arrange itself effortlessly. That is the Stoic path. That is the path we are going to walk today. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving in the comments, "From today on, I don't negotiate my worth." Let that sentence be your reminder that you're here to reclaim your inner freedom, to stop placing your dignity in the hands of money, of salary, of approval, or any external force that once made you believe you were worth less than you are. This is the moment to prove to yourself that your essence is not for sale, that your peace has no price, and that your life deserves to be lived from clarity, not from fear. Without further delay, let's begin. First Stoic lesson. Money is a tool, not an identity. Money is a tool, not an identity. The phrase sounds simple, almost obvious, yet it's one of the hardest truths to accept in a world that has confused worth with price and dignity with appearance. When a Stoic spoke about money, it was never from a place of voluntary poverty or moral rejection of wealth. It came from a deeper understanding. Whatever governs your mind becomes your master, and whatever you keep in its proper proportion becomes your loyal servant. Money can be either one, master or servant, depending entirely on how you hold it internally. If you have money but lack mastery, then money owns you. If you have mastery, even over little, money becomes an instrument that amplifies your freedom instead of shrinking it. And here begins the real problem of our era. Most people don't use money. They use themselves in order to chase it. All of this comes from a fundamental mistake: believing that your personal worth, your dignity, your inner identity can be measured in numbers. Once your mind buys into that idea, every pay raise feels like an increase in your value, and every loss feels like a decrease. You stop working from purpose and start working from anxiety. You stop making decisions from clarity and start making them from fear. And when money governs your emotions, it governs your choices. And when it governs your choices, it governs your entire life. The Stoics understood this risk 2,000 years ago, even in societies where economic exchange was infinitely simpler than today. If they, without social media, without constant comparison, without global markets, without numbers flashing in every pocket, already warned about the danger of turning wealth into identity, imagine what they would say now, when most people live enslaved by an image rather than a reality. That is why this first lesson isn't theoretical. It is a direct strike at the root of your relationship with money. What does your mind say when you think of it? Anxiety, pride, shame, validation, competition, fear? Every one of those emotions reveals psychological dependence. Money as a tool doesn't produce emotional storms, it produces decisions. But money as identity does produce storms, because any economic threat feels like an existential threat. When someone believes they are worth what they earn, they don't fear losing money, they fear losing themselves. That is the true hell the Stoics warned about. Not the absence of money, but the absence of inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that nothing external can touch your soul. And that is the core of this lesson. Money is entirely external. It fluctuates, rises, falls, comes, goes, multiplies, shrinks, appears in some seasons and disappears in others. How could you build your identity on something so unstable? It would be like building a house on sand and blaming the world when it collapses. Identity built on money will always be on the brink of falling apart because the market changes every day, but your dignity should never change. When the Stoic looked at money, he saw an opportunity to serve, to build, to facilitate, not a mirror for his ego, not a pedestal, not a trophy. He saw a hammer, useful, powerful, practical, but incapable of defining who he was. And here comes a truth few dare to admit. Money reveals more about your character when you have it than when you lose it. An insecure heart will try to buy identity. A fragile mind will try to fill emptiness with possessions. A wounded ego will try to dominate others through what it owns. But a strong person, a person with principles, clarity, inner grounding doesn't need to inflate their presence with external symbols. Money amplifies what you already are. If you are a slave to your fears, money amplifies your slavery. If you are free in your mind, money amplifies your freedom. This is why the Stoics didn't fear becoming rich or falling into poverty. Their worth, their virtue, their character remained intact in both scenarios. But what happens when you don't understand this? Something silent yet devastating occurs. You begin to negotiate with yourself. You accept jobs that destroy your health because they pay well. You accept relationships that drain you because they offer financial comfort. You adopt habits that betray your principles just to fit into an economic circle. You start saying yes where you should say no. You begin bending where you should stand firm. You justify decisions that undermine your inner well-being. And eventually, it's no longer you who makes decisions. It's your fear of losing money. Once that fear settles in, it becomes an invisible form of slavery. You are free. You seem free. You live in a free world, but your mind is chained to a number. The Stoics proposed a radical test, one that today would seem almost impossible. Imagine losing everything. Imagine living with less. Imagine letting go of luxuries, comforts, appearances, not to learn to live in poverty, but to realize that life continues to be life even without the decorations. Seneca did this constantly. He slept on the floor even though he could afford palaces. He ate stale bread even though he could pay for feasts. It was not irrational sacrifice. It was psychological training. He wanted to teach his mind that he didn't need anything external to remain centered. He wanted his value to remain intact, even if everything external disappeared. Can you imagine the strength that creates? The one who knows how to live with little never fears losing much. And that person, precisely, is the one who handles wealth best when they have it. Now ask yourself, how many decisions in your life have you made from courage? And how many from fear of money? How many from your essence? And how many from your need to fit in economically? How many times have you stayed silent to not upset someone who supports you financially? How many times have you worked in something that killed your spirit just because you needed the paycheck? How many times have you measured your dignity based on your income? All those questions lead to one truth. Your relationship with money mirrors your relationship with yourself. If you see yourself as a tool, money becomes your master. If you see yourself as a solid identity, money becomes your tool. And here lies the deepest teaching of this first lesson. Money does not give you freedom, but inner freedom teaches you how to use money. When you master your mind, your purpose, your desires, your decisions, money stops being a master. It stops manipulating you, frightening you, chasing you. It becomes something that flows, something that comes and goes, something you use when it's useful and set aside when it's not. Money was never the problem. The problem is the identity you built around it. Let it go, observe it, dismantle it, and you'll recover a freedom worth more than any amount you could ever earn. Second Stoic lesson. It is wiser to reduce your desires than to increase your income. There comes a point in life when you realize you're not really chasing money. You're chasing a feeling of control, safety, relief, recognition. But you rarely stop to notice that the more you desire, the more vulnerable you become. Epictetus said it with brutal precision. True wealth isn't about having more, it's about needing less. The one who reduces his desires regains his freedom. The one who multiplies them becomes trapped in an endless game he can never win, a game where feeling complete is always postponed to a later moment that never comes. Modern minds have been conditioned to believe that peace can be purchased, that calm lives inside a number, that rest arrives when your account balance crosses a new threshold. But the truth is that most inner storms don't come from a lack of money, they come from the inability to be at peace with what you already have. Uncontrolled desire is a silent trap. It begins as a simple aspiration, but ends as a chain. Every desire demands attention, comparison, anxiety, time, hope, and fear. Fear of losing something you don't even have yet. And here's the painful part. Most of your desires didn't come from you. They came from the noise of the world. You were taught to want more than you actually need. You were told that if you're not constantly rising, you're failing. You've heard so many times that success looks a certain way, that now you chase things that don't even align with your essence. But the Stoic understands, reducing desires is not the death of ambition, it is the purification of it. It's not extinguishing your fire, it's directing it. It's not resignation, it's dropping the burdens that were never yours to carry. When you reduce your desires, something inside you reorganizes. What once felt urgent becomes optional. What once felt essential loses its shine. What once kept you awake now seems unnecessary. And it's not the world that changes you. Your goals shift, your habits shift, your spending shifts, your expectations shift. A mind that desires constantly is always restless, always hungry, always waiting. A mind that needs less finally breathes. And that breath, though society ignores, it is an act of power. Because in a world that constantly demands more, only a strong spirit can say, I don't need that to be at peace. Here's the irony. When you reduce your desires, you don't become poor, you become unbreakable. The one who desires less is the one most prepared for life's blows, because his stability doesn't hang from external threads. He can lose money, opportunities, status, comforts, but he doesn't lose himself. Financial storms destroy those who need too much, not those who've learned to live with little. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, practiced days of extreme frugality, not out of necessity, but out of training. He wanted to remind himself that nothing he owned truly belonged to him, and that the greatest freedom is this: knowing that if tomorrow life stripped you down to the minimum, you would still be you, without shame, without fear, without collapse. Reducing your desires doesn't mean living in deprivation. It means living with intention. It means asking, every time you want something, does this come from my essence or from my ego? Does this build me or distract me? Does this add to my peace or add to my anxiety? When you start filtering this way, you discover how many of your goals were fabricated, how many of your purchases were emotional anesthetics, how many of your urgencies were borrowed from others, how many of your dreams were just social pressure dressed as purpose. Stoicism doesn't ask you to renounce success, it asks you to renounce slavery. And the most common slavery is being dominated by your own desires without even noticing. Unchecked desire always turns into emotional debt, because when you want something too intensely, your mind starts living for it. You obsess, you compare, you get frustrated when it doesn't come, you get euphoric when it does, and you collapse again when it leaves. It's a cycle that never ends. But when you reduce your desires, the cycle breaks. You can have goals without depending on them. You can enjoy without attaching. You can advance without anxiety. And that, though it sounds simple, is a form of wealth very few people ever experience. Here's something almost no one notices. When you reduce your desires, you increase your power to choose. You no longer accept any job just for money. You no longer buy things just to feel something. You no longer join projects just to feel enough. You no longer enter relationships out of fear of being alone. The one who desires less chooses better. And the one who chooses better lives better. Because life is not measured by what you accumulate, but by what you decide is enough. Sufficiency is a muscle, and when you train it, you stop seeing the world from scarcity and start seeing it from clarity. Epictetus taught that freedom begins within, and that no one can be truly free if they live ruled by their desires. Desire is a gentle tyrant. It promises happiness, but delivers dependence. promises relief, but gives restlessness. Promises abundance, but leaves you empty. And the most dangerous part? It always convinces you that the next desire will finally complete you, until you discover it doesn't. But when you reduce your desires, you destroy the illusion. You no longer chase the fantasy of, when I have this, everything will be fine. You realize everything is fine when you are fine. And that is the biggest blow you can deliver to a system designed to trap you in endless cycles of consumption and craving. Reducing desires doesn't make you complacent, it makes you conscious. It doesn't make you mediocre, it makes you sovereign. It doesn't make you poor, it makes you untouchable. Because true wealth, and the Stoics knew this, is not measured by what you accumulate, but by what you can release without losing your peace. If you can let something go without feeling like you're losing your identity, you are free. And freedom is the ultimate goal of inner mastery. That's why this second lesson isn't advice, it's a test. Look at your life and ask yourself, how much of what I desire truly belongs to me? How much have I mistaken for need when it was only habit? How much of my financial stress comes from trying to sustain a lifestyle I never needed to be at peace? And how much of my suffering comes not from lack of money, but from excess desire? Freedom doesn't arrive when you earn more. It arrives when you want less. And when that happens, money stops being a master and becomes what it was always meant to be. A tool, not your identity, not your judge, not your executioner. Just a tool you choose how, when, and why to use. Third Stoic lesson. Chosen frugality is freedom, not lack. Frugality is not poverty. It's not denial. It's not forced sacrifice. It is an act of power so profound that, in its simplicity, few truly understand it. Most people don't fear running out of money, they fear losing the things they believe they need to feel worthy. And that is where the Stoic breaks the entire paradigm. While the world measures its well-being by how much it accumulates, the Stoic measures it by how much he can release without losing his calm. Chosen frugality is a silent message to the world that says, I do not depend on what I own. My stability does not live outside of me. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men of his time, intentionally lived with less than he could afford, not out of extreme austerity, but out of inner discipline. He phrased it clearly, practice living with little so that, if one day you must do it, it won't feel unfamiliar. And this wisdom is as brutally relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. We live in a world that comforts you into fragility, a world that numbs you with daily pleasures until you lose all tolerance for discomfort, a world that sells you the idea that living well means having more, when, in reality, living well is needing less. Here's the truth no one tells you. Frugality isn't a reduction of your life, it is an expansion of your strength. Chosen frugality doesn't make you poorer, it trains you. It trains you not to fear financial shifts. It trains you to withstand the absence of luxury. It trains you to distinguish between desire and need. It trains you so that if life ever takes something away, it doesn't take you with it. Because anyone who depends on comfort to feel at peace lives in quiet anxiety, even if they don't admit it. Deep down, they know that if life removes their comforts, their stability collapses with them. But someone trained in frugality builds a kind of security no bank can offer. The security of knowing you can live with little without feeling like less. That inner freedom is the greatest wealth you will ever own. And there is something even deeper. Living with less doesn't mean rejecting your tastes. It means refusing to be enslaved by them. The difference is enormous. People think frugality is limiting, but in truth, it is liberating. When you intentionally decide what enters your life, everything gains meaning. When you stop crowding your space with excess, your mind breathes. When you stop overcrowding your time with purchased distractions, your soul settles. Frugality is not losing, it is gaining mental, emotional, and spiritual space. It is removing noise so clarity can appear, removing weight so direction can emerge. And this principle becomes even more powerful when applied to your financial habits. Most people don't spend out of need, they spend out of impulse. They spend to feel something, to cover emptiness, to fit in, to impress, to avoid facing the silence of their own mind. The Stoic sees this with cold clarity. Every excessive expense is an emotion disguised as a purchase. Chosen frugality dismantles that mechanism. It forces you to ask who you are without all those adornments. It forces you to face your truth without external crutches. And that honesty, though uncomfortable at first, is the beginning of real freedom. Frugality makes you strong in times of abundance and in times of scarcity. If tomorrow life gives you wealth, you don't lose control. If tomorrow life takes it away, you don't break. Your emotional stability stops fluctuating with the economy. It stops depending on salaries, bonuses, luxuries, or social validation. You remain the same with much or with little. That consistency, that identity that does not shift with your possessions, is the exact definition of inner freedom. Chosen frugality also reveals something uncomfortable. How much of your happiness depended on things, not character? When you reduce your comforts, you discover whether your joy is authentic or borrowed. You discover whether your peace comes from within or from the entertainment you buy. You discover whether your security is mental or material. And when you see your attachments with that level of honesty, your true growth begins. You start removing excess not because you must, but because you no longer need it. And every unnecessary thing you release gives you back a piece of your power. Modern society tells you that luxury elevates you. Stoicism tells you that constant luxury weakens you. The body gets used to it. The mind gets complacent. The soul goes numb. When you cannot tolerate discomfort, you are fragile. When you cannot tolerate simplicity, you are dependent. And dependence is the root of all slavery. That is why chosen frugality is not minimalism, it is training for autonomy. The one who can live with little is not impressed by much. The one who can renounce pleasure is not ruled by it. The one who can enjoy without needing to possess is truly free. Frugality is not rejecting the world, it is choosing it with more precision. It is understanding that your value is not in what you own, but in your ability to do without it. It is remembering that the essential was never material, that your dignity, your serenity, and your character cannot be bought or sold. You can walk through life without much decoration and still radiate strength. You can have less and feel more. You can live simply and think deeply. You can release what you once thought defined you and, in doing so, finally find yourself. This lesson is a mirror. It forces you to see how much you depend on what you possess. It forces you to ask what would happen if it all disappeared tomorrow. It forces you to question whether your identity stands on solid rock or on things time can easily take away. And above all, it reminds you that true freedom was never in accumulating. It was always in letting go, in releasing, in being able to say, I remain myself, even without this. Chosen frugality is a spiritual practice disguised as a financial habit. It is a silent declaration that says, my peace is not for sale. And when you reach that point, when you truly feel it, money changes roles in your life. It stops being a status symbol. It stops being a tool to fill emotional voids. It stops being a means of impressing others. It becomes simply a resource, nothing more. And you are the one who decides how to use it, not the other way around. That is why this third lesson is foundational. Because while most people try to build their life upward, the Stoic builds inward first. Before wanting more, he asks if he can live with less. Before desiring abundance, he ensures his soul is not weak. Before aspiring to luxury, he strengthens his character so he won't fall into dependence. And that inner order is what allows you to remain steady when life shifts. And life always shifts. Chosen frugality is not the end. It is the means to reclaim something excess always steals: your inner power. And once you reclaim that power, you can walk through the world without fear, because you know the essential is already yours, and nothing external has the authority to break you. Fourth Stoic lesson: every expense has a hidden cost: your time and your peace. Most people believe that when they pay for something, they pay only with money. They think the cost is in the price tag, the bill, the visible number. But the Stoic looks deeper. Every purchase you make, every commitment you accept, every expense you say yes to has a hidden cost you rarely see. And yet it is the most expensive of all: your time and your peace. Money can return. Time never does. Peace, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild. And still, we live in a culture that teaches us to protect money while wasting life. We are taught to save pennies but not hours. We are taught to fear losing money but not losing serenity. This lesson is uncomfortable because it forces you to admit something brutal. You are not poor because of what you earn. You are poor because of what you are willing to trade away. Every time you buy something you don't need, you aren't losing money. You're losing time. Time you had to work for. Time you could have used to build your character, strengthen your mind or body, live your values, or share moments with those you love. But you turn that time into an object, an impulse, a distraction, the need to fill a void. The Stoic looks at you and asks, how much of your life are you exchanging for this? And the question hurts because you already know the answer. You know that many purchases were not about utility but anxiety. You know you went into debt, not out of necessity, but out of comparison. You know you've sacrificed your mental peace to maintain a lifestyle that doesn't even feel like yours. You know you've traded hours of your existence for things that will lose value in days. But here is the Stoic depth. Life is a constant exchange, and you decide what you are willing to give. You cannot have everything because you are not infinite. Every expense is a declaration of what you truly consider important. If you spend to impress, you surrender your peace to someone else's opinion. If you spend on impulse, you surrender your time to the emotion of the moment. If you spend to fill internal voids, you surrender your freedom to whatever you think you need. The Stoic evaluates every expense not with desire, nor even with affordability, but with virtue. He does not ask, do I want it? He does not ask, can I pay for it? He asks, does this bring me closer or further from the life I want to build? And here, the insight goes deeper. You don't just spend money. You also spend mental energy. When you live above your means, you spend your tranquility trying to keep up. When you take on unnecessary debt, you spend your peace fearing the future. When you buy things you don't need, you spend mental space managing, storing, organizing, or regretting them. Everything has a hidden cost that never appears on a receipt, but is felt in your mind, your body, your spirit. The Stoic sees with absolute clarity. Freedom is not measured by how much you earn, but by how much it costs you to maintain the life you live. If your lifestyle demands a constant sacrifice of your peace, it is not a lifestyle. It is a comfortable prison, and this prison is one many people defend without realizing it. They think working more to pay for more things is progress, when often it is simply accelerating their own depletion. They believe more money means more freedom, when often more money means more obligations, more expectations, more pressure to maintain an image. The Stoic breaks that pattern and asks, what price are you paying for what you claim makes you happy? The truth is simple. Your relationship with money reveals your relationship with life. If you spend to escape, you are living in flight. If you spend to impress, you are living in performance. If you spend to compensate emptiness, you are living in dependence. But when you finally learn to see the hidden cost of every financial decision, you reclaim power. You begin to choose with calm, with clarity, with inner stability. And something extraordinary happens. The less you buy, the more you own, because you own time, mental space, freedom, and self-control. The Stoic question is simple but transformative. How many hours of your life will this cost? Not dollars, hours. Because your salary isn't a number, it is your life converted into currency. When you buy something expensive, you are literally handing over days of your existence. Days that will never return. Days you could have used to grow, to love, to create, to become who you want to be. And when you see it that way, you begin to relate to money differently. You begin to protect what matters, your time. And then there's peace. How much of your calm are you sacrificing? If you go into debt to have more, you mortgage your future tranquility. If you spend compulsively, you partner with chaos. If you take on financial commitments out of fear of seeming less, you allow external judgment to determine your peace. The Stoic refuses this, because he knows his mind is his temple, his peace, his treasure, his time, his life, and nothing is worth sacrificing those three pillars. This lesson is a reminder of sovereignty. You cannot control the market, inflation, the global economy, or the decisions of the world. But you can control your choices. You can choose to live with less pressure, fewer commitments, less anxiety. You can choose to walk lighter. You can choose a life where you no longer chase every opportunity just to maintain a lifestyle that never gave you true fulfillment. You can choose to release the illusion that value is external when it has always been internal. And here lies the final wisdom of this lesson. When you reduce the hidden cost of your decisions, life becomes lighter. Not because you have less, but because you depend less. Not because you spend less, but because you waste less of yourself. Not because you abandon the material, but because the material no longer owns you. That is the true purpose of this principle. To teach you to see beyond the visible price, so you can protect what truly matters. Your time, your serenity, your inner freedom. Fifth Stoic lesson. Living beyond your means is practicing slavery in advance. There is a chain many people carry without realizing it. It's not made of iron. It doesn't weigh down your hands. It makes no sound as it drags. It's a silent chain, elegant, even because it usually disguises itself as a lifestyle. And yet, it is one of the deepest forms of modern slavery, the habit of living beyond your means. You don't need someone to lock you up to lose your freedom. You only need to build a life your reality cannot sustain. When that happens, you no longer live for yourself. You live to pay. You live to maintain a standard that wasn't born from your inner peace, but from your need to be seen. You live to sustain an image whose emotional cost will always be higher than the financial one. The Stoic sees this with absolute clarity. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by imperial wealth, lived with a simplicity that confused many. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, practiced voluntary poverty to remind his mind that nothing material was essential. And Epictetus, who was born a slave, understood better than anyone that true slavery is not external, it is internal. The slavery of desires you cannot control, expectations you cannot afford, lifestyles you cannot sustain without sacrificing your soul. When you live beyond your means, that is precisely what you sacrifice, your soul. You hand over your peace, your freedom of choice, your emotional stability. You become someone who works not to build a purpose, but to maintain a character that needs the new outfit, the new phone, the new car, the new trip, the new appearance. A character that will never be enough because it does not exist. It is an illusion you consume every day while you consume yourself. The highest cost is not economic, it is existential. Because when your lifestyle demands more than you can sustain peacefully, You begin living in a permanent state of tension. Pressure chases you. Comparison chases you. The idea that you should have more chases you, even when you already have enough to live well. And here's the tragedy. That mental state does not improve when you earn more money. Those who live beyond their means do so not because of their income, but because of their mentality. Desire has no bottom, and the person who lives to satisfy desire is forever thirsty, even when surrounded by water. The Stoic does not run from pleasure or comfort, but he never kneels before them. He sees them as tools, not gods, because he understands something the modern world has forgotten. Any comfort you cannot sustain peacefully is not comfort, it is a shackle. Living beyond your means is not progress. It is stress in disguise. It is anxiety dressed as ambition. It is dependence painted as abundance. And here is where this lesson becomes deeply personal. Living beyond your means is not really about money. It's about your relationship with desire. It's about the image you think you need to feel worthy. It's about buying things you don't truly want but feel obligated to have so you don't fall behind. It's about the part of you that fears looking less, fears being judged, fears embracing simplicity as a virtue. If you never question this part of yourself, it becomes your jailer. But the Stoic arrives with something liberating. You have nothing to prove. No object makes you more worthy. No luxury makes you more valuable. No lifestyle makes you superior, because the value you seek outside was born inside. It lives in your character, your temperance, your ability to hold your gaze without shame, your capacity to feel complete without ornaments. Living one step below your means is not poverty, it is strategy. It is intelligence. It is freedom. That single step, just one, is where your peace breathes. It is where you can say no without fear, decide without pressure, fail without collapsing. When you live at the edge of what you can afford, any blow destroys you. When you live below that edge, any blow teaches you. The problem is society celebrates the opposite. It celebrates excess, not prudence. Appearance, not discipline. The immediate, not the sustainable. They make you believe that if you can pay for something, you should have it. But the Stoic looks directly into your conscience and says, being able to pay doesn't mean it's good for you. What you can do is not always what you should do. Freedom isn't having more, it's needing less. A life lived beyond your means creates a mind lived beneath its potential. Financial worry steals mental space. Anxiety about maintaining your lifestyle steals clarity. The pressure to keep up steals authenticity. When life becomes a race to sustain what you cannot carry, you stop advancing in what truly matters. And what matters is what makes you stronger, not what makes you shiny. Now imagine what it would be like to live below your real capacity. Imagine waking without fear of the end of the month. Imagine not needing to impress anyone. Imagine being able to quit a job that destroys your health. Imagine having the emotional and financial margin to choose calmly. That is not poverty. That is power. That is personal sovereignty. That is what the Stoics practiced and taught, to depend on nothing that can be taken away, because anything that can be taken cannot be the foundation of your security. If your life depends on others' approval, you are losing freedom. If your lifestyle depends on an income that suffocates you, you are losing life. If your financial decisions depend on your impulses, you are losing control. This lesson reminds you that freedom is a daily practice. One decision at a time. One questioned desire at a time. One delayed purchase at a time. Not to live like a monk, but to live like a human who does not enslave himself. Living below your means allows you to grow, to breathe, to think, to choose. But above all, it reminds you that your value is not the sum of your possessions. It is the sum of your principles. That is the wealth no market can depreciate. That is the prosperity no external change can threaten, and that is Stoic wealth, the kind that liberates, not the kind that enslaves. Sixth Stoic lesson. Debt is a chain disguised as a quick solution. Debt is a shadow that moves quietly. It doesn't appear suddenly. It doesn't crash into your life like an obvious tragedy. It doesn't introduce itself as an enemy. On the contrary, it arrives dressed as salvation. It shows up like an open door when you feel all the others have closed. It whispers, "You deserve it. You can pay it later." What could possibly go wrong? Debt rarely presents itself as what it truly is. It disguises itself as opportunity, as relief, as an immediate answer to a desire that refuses to wait. But the Stoic knows this. There is no chain more dangerous than the one that looks like a gift, because that's the one you accept with a smile, unaware that you've just sold your future freedom for a momentary impulse. Debt is a form of modern slavery that requires no bars to imprison you. It captures you through time, not space. It binds you through obligation, not force. It turns you into a prisoner of your own commitments. And the most striking part? It requires no oppressor. You build the cell yourself. Debt is, above all, a conversation between you and your desires, a negotiation between your impulse and your prudence. Every time you choose debt, you sign a pact with your future self, one he often didn't approve, but will have to pay for. The Stoics understood this trap well. Even though they lived in a world without credit cards, consumer loans, or endless installments, they understood human nature, its hunger for immediacy, its aversion to effort, its obsession with satisfying desire now, pushing consequences into later. That's why they warned, any commitment that ties you to tomorrow must be made with extreme clarity. For them, debt was not only financial, it was emotional, mental, spiritual. How many times, in the name of quick relief, do you load yourself with burdens that steal your peace for years? How many times do you say yes without considering what that yes will demand of you later? How many times do you buy, agree, commit, or borrow because waiting feels more painful than the weight of consequences? Seneca said that the worst poverty is needing too much. Debt is born exactly from that excessive need. The need for status, validation, comfort, immediate gratification, the illusion of progress without real growth. Debt promises you access to a larger life than you can actually sustain. But the price is losing the space you need to grow. Because when your future income is already committed, your present freedom is already gone. You think you're buying time, but in truth, you're losing it. Because your future energy will be consumed paying for something your present self enjoyed for 5 minutes. This is the cruelty of debt. The pleasure is short. The burden is long. What excites you today becomes nothing tomorrow, but the obligation remains. The more obligations you collect, the fewer options you have. The less margin, the less breath. What looked like a solution becomes a constant reminder that you traded your autonomy for an impulse. Debt doesn't just take your money. It takes your calm, your focus, your creativity, your sense of ownership over your life. That's why the Stoic asks, before borrowing, does this desire deserve my freedom? Not, is it beautiful? Is it convenient? Do I deserve it? But, is it worth my autonomy? Because every debt is your future self working to repair a decision your current self made. And when you picture your future self carrying a weight you created, it becomes impossible not to feel a moral responsibility, a desire to protect him, to not betray him, to not shrink his life for a temporary want. Debt grows strong with 3 things: haste, self-deception, and comparison. Haste tells you, do it now or lose it, when almost nothing in life is truly urgent. Self-deception tells you, tomorrow you'll be in a better place, when tomorrow simply inherits today's problem. Comparison tells you, everyone lives this way, when most people are quietly drowning and pretending they're fine. The Stoic cuts all three at the root, because serenity is built on clarity, not illusion. But not all debt is evil. The Stoics were not extreme. They understood that some debts function as tools, investments that open possibilities, calculated decisions that build the future. The difference is intention. Debt taken with wisdom feels like a bridge. Debt taken impulsively feels like a chain. You can sense the difference in your chest. A bridge expands you. A chain tightens you. Emotional debt works exactly the same. When you commit to people, projects, or habits you cannot sustain, you live with the same feeling of endless obligation. The Stoic observes, every excess becomes a burden. Every unmanaged desire becomes dependence. Every impatient decision becomes an obstacle for wiser ones later. This is why they practice sobriety. Not forced austerity, but chosen freedom. Now think about your own life. How many decisions have you made because I want it now? How many purchases came from emptiness, not need? How many times did the phrase "pay it in 12 installments, you won't even feel it" catch you? But you will feel it. You'll feel it each time the payment is due, each time that money could have gone to something meaningful, each time you want to rest, change careers, take a risk, and can't, because you're chained to past impulses. The Stoic seeks a light life, not light from lack of ambition, but light from lack of unnecessary burdens. He wants his full strength available when life demands it. He wants margin to make decisions calmly. He wants peace to think clearly, not urgently. None of that is possible when your life is mortgaged to your impulses. Debt is the background music of those who haven't learned to say enough. But you are here to learn mastery. Mastery over your mind, your desires, your relationship with the material world. You are here to build a character strong enough not to need adornments, because the Stoic's true luxury isn't what he can buy. It's what he can reject. It's not accessing everything. It's not needing anything to feel whole. When you reach that state, debt is no longer a temptation. It becomes something you observe from a distance, with maturity, with sovereignty. A free mind does not fall into debt easily. A trained mind knows that every financial commitment is also an emotional one. So it chooses slowly. It protects its autonomy. It weighs every desire before handing over its freedom. Debt, then, is not merely economic. It is symbolic. It represents the struggle between immediate gratification and long-term wisdom, between who you want to be today and who you need to be tomorrow. And when you master this lesson, you discover something transformative. Real wealth is not what you can buy. It's what you can reject without feeling poor. Freedom is not buying without thinking. It's living without owing. Abundance is not having more. It's having more room to choose. Because the most dangerous debt is not financial. It's the one you incur with yourself when you betray your own balance for quick relief. And that debt always demands repayment. If something in you felt relief hearing this, follow that instinct. Subscribe, not as a favor to this podcast, but as an act of self-respect. It means you're choosing to stop living tied to fear, salary, opinion, or pressure. You're choosing to think differently, to relate to money from freedom rather than need, to live with more calm, more clarity, more intention. Do it now, and share this message with whoever needs it. Because when one mind remembers it has no price, it inevitably helps another awaken too. 7th Stoic lesson. Constant luxury weakens the character. Luxury has a deceptive quality. It feels light when you receive it, but heavy when you try to live without it. It's like silk gently wrapping around your neck, so soft you barely notice it tightening. And when you finally realize you're short of breath, you're already addicted to that softness. You fear letting it go. You fear the rough texture of real life. That's why the Stoics were wary of uninterrupted luxury, not because they opposed enjoyment, but because they understood how luxury operates in the mind. Constant luxury does not make you freer, it makes you weaker. It conditions you to a level of comfort that eventually becomes a requirement. What begins as a privilege ends as a need. That is the real danger. Seneca, who had access to every luxury Rome could offer, intentionally spent seasons living with extreme simplicity. Not because he couldn't afford more, but because he knew that a soul accustomed only to ease grows dull. It loses edge, it loses resilience, it loses touch with its own inner strength. For him, voluntary poverty was training a reminder that he could live without adornments, without excess, without depending on anything external to feel balanced. When you voluntarily let go of what the world considers indispensable, you discover that your true strength was never in what you owned, but in what you could endure. Luxury works like a gentle narcotic. It doesn't numb you suddenly. It numbs you slowly. It lowers your tolerance for discomfort. It reduces your willingness to face difficulty. It erodes your capacity to endure adversity. It makes you believe everything should be easy, fast, pleasant. And when life inevitably confronts you with something harsh, your spirit collapses because you've forgotten how to stand without artificial cushions. This is why Stoicism warns, what you enjoy endlessly today may become your greatest weakness tomorrow. Here's what many fail to understand. The problem isn't luxury itself, it's the need for it. Not the comfortable home, the nice car, the good clothing, the exquisite food, the refined experiences, but the dependence on them. Luxury becomes toxic when it stops being a choice and becomes a crutch. When enjoyment turns into dependency. When preference becomes fear of losing it. At that point, your character begins to wither. A strong mind does not fear living with less. Only a weakened mind believes its value drops when the external changes. Constant abundance creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that more will always be available. More comfort, more pleasure, more ease. But life doesn't work that way. Life fluctuates. Life removes. Life tests. Life does not ask if you're ready. If your soul has only walked on rugs, every stone will hurt you. If your spirit has only tasted sweetness, any bitterness will shatter you. Luxury anesthetizes your ability to adapt. It makes you believe the world should adjust to you, when in truth it is your character that must adapt to the world. The Stoics knew that inner strength is forged through voluntary discomfort, not forced suffering, but conscious renunciation, choosing, every so often, to live with less so you remember that you can. Facing small, intentional challenges so you remember that peace does not depend on perfect conditions. Someone addicted to constant luxury loses the ability to endure. Someone trained in simplicity, even with access to everything, never loses internal stability. Think of how many people feel superior because of what they can buy, and how quickly they collapse when life takes that ability away. Think of those who confuse having with being, who believe their importance rises with the price of their possessions. These people live in deep insecurity because their stability depends on forces beyond their control. When circumstances change, their identity crumbles. A house made of dust. The Stoic prepares for that day, not out of fear, but out of awareness. He knows he cannot control markets, economies, or fortune. He knows he can only control his relationship with things. So he trains his ability to let go, because the person who can let go does not fear losing, and the one who does not fear losing is indestructible. Constant luxury teaches the wrong lesson. It teaches you to avoid discomfort, to avoid challenge, to expect ease, to believe life must come wrapped in velvet, to feel meaningful. But real life has rough edges. Real life carries hardship. Real life demands resilience. If you never train for it, you will live afraid. The Stoic does not seek discomfort to suffer. He seeks it to grow. Each renunciation strengthens the muscle of discipline. Each sober choice strengthens internal clarity. Each moment in which you prove you do not depend on externals reaffirms your freedom. Real power lies not in having access to everything, but in needing nothing. That is the most misunderstood part of Stoicism. It's not poverty. It's sobriety. It's not sacrifice. It's preparation. It's not limitation. It's self-mastery. Constant luxury leads you down a strange path. It teaches you to expect more than you contribute, to assume everything should be fast, comfortable, and pleasant. But life is not obligated to protect you. The more fragile you become, the more the real world frightens you. The Stoic aims for the opposite, to be so internally strong that he can enjoy luxury without becoming its slave, to use it when it's present, but not collapse when it's gone. Used wisely, luxury is enjoyment. Used excessively, it's a trap. Look at society today. How many feel incomplete if they aren't constantly consuming? How many believe they deserve luxury without effort? How many drown in debt, not from necessity, but from appearance? How many destroy their peace to sustain a lifestyle that reflects not their essence, but their insecurity? The endless pursuit of luxury is often the attempt to fill internal emptiness with external decoration. But no object, no matter how beautiful, replaces inner work. And when the soul is bare, when the world collapses, when crisis arrives, we learn very quickly that luxury doesn't protect, doesn't hold, doesn't console, doesn't strengthen. Strength comes from well-practiced simplicity, from having cultivated resilience, from having trained the mind to withstand fluctuation, loss, discomfort. Resilience is not born in constant comfort. It is forged in the art of living with just enough, while still preserving inner grace. A Stoic looks at a luxury item and feels no dependence. He enjoys it if it's there, lives just as well if it isn't, because he knows the real value was never external. A person who has practiced voluntary simplicity knows nothing external is essential. And that certainty, the peace that comes from knowing you can live with less without feeling poor, is one of the strongest forms of freedom. It is not the lack of luxury that impoverishes. It is the inability to live without it. Think about that. 8th Stoic lesson. Creating value matters more than creating appearance. We live in an era where appearance has become a kind of social currency. And the most dangerous part isn't that people want to look good. It's that they want to look valuable before actually being valuable. The difference seems subtle, but it's enormous. Because when your life revolves around impressing others, your entire existence becomes a performance, a polished portrayal of success with no foundation underneath it, a glossy facade that collapses the moment life brings a real storm. That's why the Stoics were uncompromising about this principle. Appearance is air. Value is structure. Appearance shines. Value supports. Appearance deceives. Value transforms. Appearance crumbles in silence. Value holds you up when life tightens its grip around your throat. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the greatest empire of his time, had everything that today symbolizes status, power, wealth, luxury, recognition. And yet he constantly repeated, "What matters is the kind of person you are when no one is watching." Because real value isn't built in public. It's built in solitude. In those hours where it's just you, without applause, without witnesses, without external approval. That is where you become who you are, not who you pretend to be. Appearance lives off the eyes of others. Value lives off the strength of your character. Modern society has turned seeming into an idol. Social media rewards image over effort. Metrics celebrate visibility over depth. People feel successful because others think they are. But what happens when the noise fades? When the lights go off and the only thing left is the echo of your own conscience? If all you've built is a mask, your life feels hollow. If what you project doesn't match what you are, you will live with constant fear. Fear of being exposed, fear that reality won't match the fantasy you sell, fear that someone will notice there is more shine than substance. A Stoic rejects appearance, not because it's bad, but because it's insufficient. Appearance won't save you. It won't hold you in adversity. It won't give you strength during crisis. It won't accompany you at night when your soul breaks a little. It won't help you make hard decisions. It won't bring you peace. Appearance is a suit that looks great until it rains. Then you realize it's made of paper. Value, on the other hand, is armor. Not always flashy, but it's what protects you when the world turns harsh. Creating appearance is fast. Creating value is slow. Appearance requires comparison. Value requires discipline. To seek appearance, you must keep your eyes on others. To build value, you must look inward. That is why many choose the easy path. It is easier to perform than to transform, easier to pretend than to grow. But comfort is bread for today and hunger for tomorrow. Growth is planting. It hurts sometimes, but it always nourishes. The problem with chasing appearance is that you enter an endless race. It is never enough. Someone will always seem richer, stronger, more successful, more disciplined, happier. If your sense of worth depends on the outside, you condemn yourself to a lifetime of comparison. But comparison never brings peace, only anxiety. And anxiety is the clearest sign that you are living for the eyes of others, not the voice of your own conscience. The Stoics ask the question almost no one dares to ask: am I building who I am, or who I want others to think I am? That question is uncomfortable because it reveals truths you'd rather avoid. It shows how much of your life is shaped to fit in, how much is done to avoid disappointing others, how much is driven by fear of seeming less. It exposes which habits are authentic and which are a performance, whether you work from discipline or from the desire for applause. And when you answer honestly, you realize that part of your life has been built on sand. Why does creating value matter more than creating appearance? Value is internal control. Appearance is external dependency. Value strengthens you. Appearance weakens you. Value brings peace. Appearance brings anxiety. Value stays when everything collapses. Appearance abandons you. Value is yours. Appearance is borrowed. Think about it. Someone who lives only to impress is never at home within themselves. They are always performing, always editing, always adjusting their public character. They live tired. They live tense. They live terrified that anything might break the illusion. But someone who lives from value, from inner substance, feels solid, grounded, free. They walk through life without fear because they are not trying to maintain a mask. What you see is what they are. That is freedom. Value is built through invisible actions. Habits, discipline, study, silent work, hard decisions, conscious sacrifice, self-control. Appearance is built through visible gestures, photos, quotes, purchases, poses, curated moments. One feeds the ego. The other feeds the character. One is noise, the other is root. Ask yourself, when life hits you hard, what do you want, noise or roots? The Stoics insisted that what you carry inside determines how you face everything outside. A solid soul turns any situation into an opportunity. A fragile soul breaks under the smallest storm. This is why real wealth lies in value, not in appearance. Appearance may give admiration, but value gives integrity. Appearance may open superficial doors, but value opens the right doors. Appearance may attract followers, but value attracts respect. And real respect never comes from shine. It comes from depth. Today's culture pushes you to sell an image, to show what you're not, to exaggerate what you have, to hide what hurts, to edit your life until it becomes digestible to others. And the more you yield to that pressure, the less you know yourself, the less you hear yourself, the less you belong to yourself. One day you look in the mirror and have no idea who you are, only who you tried to look like. That is slavery. Elegant slavery, maybe, but slavery nonetheless. Creating value, on the other hand, is an act of rebellion in a superficial world. It is choosing a life that is not for sale, choosing an identity that does not depend on applause, choosing strength that does not depend on opinions, choosing a purpose that does not seek validation. It is living to honor your conscience, not to entertain the crowd. And when you do that, your relationship with money changes, because you no longer use it to impress. You use it to build. You no longer use it to pretend. You use it to contribute. You no longer use it to fill emptiness. You use it to expand your life. Money stops being a mask and becomes a tool. If you focus on appearance, you will always fear losing what makes you look valuable. If you focus on value, you will never fear losing anything, because your wealth travels with you. A person with value can start from zero and still build something great. A person with only appearance can survive only as long as the illusion lasts. And illusions don't last long. So ask yourself right now, what am I truly building? Value or appearance? Character or character acting? Purpose or facade? Your answer will define your relationship with money, success, and life itself. And if you have the courage to choose the path of value, you'll discover what the Stoics knew centuries ago. True freedom is never in what you possess, but in who you are capable of being without anything. Ninth Stoic lesson: do not sell your peace for a higher salary. Modern life pushes you to believe that success is measured in income, bonuses, numbers that rise and fall on a screen. But there is a quiet truth almost no one wants to admit. Some jobs pay far too little, even when they pay a lot. And not because the money is insufficient, but because they demand payment in a currency no human should ever surrender: your tranquility, your dignity, your inner time. The first thing a person loses when they sacrifice peace for a salary is not sleep or energy or enthusiasm. It is self-respect. Because deep down, very deep down, they know they signed a contract where they offered their soul and the company offered a number. And this reflection is not about quitting your job, becoming an ascetic, or living without responsibility. It is about recovering the clarity you needed to see what you once ignored. No income can compensate for a life that no longer belongs to you. Think of all those days you came home exhausted, carrying a tension you couldn't explain, but felt lodged in your shoulders, your chest, your throat. Days when you told yourself, "That's life. At least I have a job. This is just how it is." Yet at the same time, in a silent corner of your mind, you knew you weren't exchanging hours for money. You were exchanging life for survival. And that is where modern slavery begins, not when you sign a contract, but when you start justifying the unjustifiable. When you accept yelling, humiliation, chronic stress, constant injustice, all disguised as professionalism. When you allow the urgency of paying bills to steal the greater urgency, protecting your soul. A salary can buy food, shelter, distractions, but it will never buy you a peaceful mind. And if you lose that, if you surrender it slowly, without noticing, nothing external can give it back. This is why the Stoics never measured wealth in coins, but in autonomy. They knew that whoever depends emotionally on money ends up obeying anything that threatens it. They knew that whoever fears losing income also loses the freedom to say no. And once you lose the freedom to say no, you are no longer the owner of your life. You become property of your obligations. There are jobs that consume you so slowly, it takes years to notice the damage. They deform you from the inside. They mold you to the rhythm of pressures that become normal. And one day, without realizing it, you no longer remember who you were before living to satisfy the expectations of others. You no longer remember what it feels like to wake up without anticipatory anxiety. You no longer know what it is to live without the invisible weight of a responsibility that never ends. And the cruelest part is that the world applauds you for enduring it. They call you responsible. They call you professional. But you know, something inside is dying. Something that should not die. The Stoics understood the value of serving, of working, of contributing to the world. But they also understood that when work destroys your soul, it ceases to be work and becomes submission. A wise person works with excellence, yes, but never from emotional slavery, never from fear, never from the belief that their worth depends on a paycheck. That is the greatest illusion of modern life, convincing you that without a salary, you are empty. When in truth, the real emptiness comes from keeping a salary that is hollowing you out. Think about this with brutal honesty. How much are you paying for that salary? Not in money, in life. How many hours you will never recover have you given to tasks that mean nothing to you? How many times have you traded laughter for meetings? How many times have you sacrificed health for urgencies that no one will remember tomorrow? How many humiliations, absurd demands, impossible expectations have you tolerated just because there was a deposit at the end of the month? How much does your peace cost? Because if you are giving it away, it means it has a price. And if it has a price, it is not peace, it is debt. A Stoic does not flee from effort, he flees from slavery. He does not reject hard work, he rejects work that destroys the soul. He does not despise money, he despises dependence. Because he knows that when a person is capable of saying, "I will not tolerate this cost," they become instantly powerful, not because they quit, but because they wake up. Because they restore a clarity the modern world tries to extinguish. The clarity that your peace is non-negotiable, that your mental health is not a luxury, that your inner time is not a whim, that your dignity is not for sale. Maybe you cannot change your job today. Maybe you have real responsibilities, people who depend on you, bills that must be paid. No one is asking you to run away. What this lesson asks is that you wake up. Stop justifying what destroys you. Return your peace to the sacred place where it belongs. Begin building alternatives, even if they are small. Stop living as if your only option were to endure. Ask yourself, with Stoic sincerity, what can I do today to recover even a little of my inner freedom? That question, asked daily, changes destinies. Your peace is not negotiable. Your dignity cannot be rented. Your soul cannot be traded for a monthly deposit. Because if you do, if you continue exchanging life for survival without awakening, there will come a moment when you have money, but no one left inside to save. And that is a cost. No Stoic, no wise person, no self-respecting human being is willing to pay. When you understand this, something profound settles within you. You stop chasing salaries that look bigger but make you smaller. You stop selling your energy to the highest bidder. You stop gifting your emotional health to environments unworthy of it, and you recover something money will never be able to buy. Inner freedom, sovereignty, the ability to live with yourself without feeling indebted. That is true wealth. That is the heart of this lesson. And that is the moment you truly understand why the Stoics were never slaves to money. 10th Stoic lesson. Accepting losses calmly is the proof of your freedom. Freedom is not measured by what you own, but by what you can let go of without breaking. Some people believe they're free because they have money, possessions, or a status admired by others. But deep inside, they live with a permanent fear, the fear of losing. Losing what they have, losing what they've built, losing what gives them identity. And it's there where life reveals its quiet truth. You are not free because you possess. You are free because you do not cling. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. He, who held the greatest empire of his time in his hands, knew that everything external is borrowed. Every victory, every richness, every position is held by an invisible thread that can snap at any moment. And still, he walked with calm, not because he was indifferent, but because he had mastered the hardest detachment of all, letting go of what he believed belonged to him. That serenity in the face of the inevitable is the true spiritual muscle, the invisible force that sustains all inner strength. Think about your own losses, not only financial ones. Think about the sensation that rises when something slips from your hands, when an investment fails, when a plan collapses, when an income disappears, when an unexpected shift shatters your stability. That knot in your chest, that obsessive thought that "what do I do now?" is the clearest sign that something external still governs your peace. Stoicism does not tell you not to feel it, invites you to inspect the root of the suffering. Does it hurt because it's a loss, or does it hurt because you believed you were the owner of something that was never truly yours? Money moves by nature. It comes and goes. It rises and falls. It flows like water. But you, when untrained, cling to it as if it were the lifeline that sustains your existence. And in that attachment, you break. Because every time money leaves, it takes a piece of your balance with it. It's as if your identity was sewn to a bank balance, and when the balance drops, your sense of worth drops with it. That is the silent tragedy of the modern world, confusing economic stability with emotional stability, when the second has never depended on the first. Accepting losses calmly doesn't mean celebrating them. It doesn't mean ignoring them. It means recognizing their nature. They are part of the flow of life, not a personal failure. What leaves creates space for what arrives. What collapses reveals what was fragile. What disappears forces you to return to yourself, to your center, to your essence. Because there lies the only wealth that does not fluctuate with the market: your inner strength, your clarity, your virtue, your ability to act with integrity even when everything seems to go wrong. Many people believe their world collapses when they lose money. But the truth is different. Financial loss only reveals the collapse that already existed within. The hidden fear, the accumulated insecurity, the emotional dependence on material things. The loss simply brings it to light. And although it hurts, it also frees you, because it shows with brutal honesty who commands your inner world, you or your circumstances. The Stoic sees every loss as training, a reminder, a deep question: who am I when everything external changes? And if the answer remains firm, then you have passed the test. Because someone who stands on inner ground never loses everything. Even when the world takes from him, his essence remains. Even when circumstances shift, his serenity is not negotiable. Even when money goes, his peace does not fall. Visualize this. You stand with open hands. In front of you, life, places, wealth, opportunities, achievements, outcomes. You hold them with care, but lightly. You don't grip them. You don't cling. You simply receive. And when the wind comes, for it always comes, some things are blown away. They fall. They drift. They disappear. Yet you remain standing, with the same open hands, aware that everything you held was there temporarily, not eternally. And you do not collapse, because your stability never lived in what you held, but in the strength that holds you. That is the spirit of this lesson. Life does not belong to you. Money does not belong to you. Nothing external belongs to you. everything is a temporary loan. And when you understand that at a deep level, loss stops being a tragedy and becomes a reminder that your worth is internal, that your dignity is permanent, that your peace is not tied to the economy but to your philosophy, that you can rebuild anything as long as you never abandon your inner strength. Most people fear losing because they don't know who they would be after the loss. The Stoic does not fear because he already knows who he is, regardless of the loss. And that is the highest form of freedom. Freedom that cannot be bought. Freedom that cannot be stolen. Freedom that makes any man sovereign, even in the storm. Accepting losses calmly is not weakness. It is mastery, and it is the clearest sign that you have stopped being a slave to money and finally become the owner of your soul. 11th Stoic lesson. Invest first in virtue, then in possessions. There are decisions that seem small, yet they separate those who build their lives from within, from those who hold them up through appearances. And this lesson strikes with uncomfortable clarity. Before investing in what the world can take from you, invest in what nothing and no one will ever be able to touch. A man without virtue may have wealth and lose everything in an instant, but a man with virtue may lose everything and still never be empty. Character does not collapse with the markets. Discipline does not lose value in a crisis. Inner clarity does not fluctuate with the economy. Virtue is the only asset that always yields returns, even when the entire world seems to be in the red. The Stoics understood that there is no investment safer than the one you make in your mind, because it is your mind that decides whether an opportunity builds you or destroys you. It is your mind that turns income into stability or downfall. It is your mind that transforms risk into growth or emotional ruin. That is why Epictetus insisted, first, take care of being, then of having. For the one who seeks only to have ends up chasing shadows, but the one who focuses on being never fears, starting from zero. Virtue is the only wealth that depends on no one, the only wealth that travels with you, even if life strips you bare. Imagine two people earning the same income. One spends it all on possessions that make them feel valuable. The other invests in learning, in training discipline, in strengthening character. Over time, who do you think will truly prosper? The modern world will tell you that the one who accumulates will. The Stoics will tell you that the one who governs himself will. Because the one who governs himself can rebuild his life 1,000 times if necessary. The one who does not, even if he owns everything, lives on the edge of emotional collapse, because he does not know how to hold his own mind. And wealth without direction inevitably becomes chaos. Virtue is the most powerful insurance against adversity, because when you have discernment, no one can deceive you. When you have temperance, no temptation can divert you. When you have discipline, no impulse can dominate you. When you have inner clarity, no external opinion can control you. Possessions protect your body. Virtue protects your destiny. Possessions sustain you for a time. Virtue sustains you for a lifetime. That is why the Stoics were feared, because no one could manipulate a man who needed nothing to stand tall. Before buying something you want, you should ask yourself, does this feed my character or only my ego? Because the ego always wants more, always demands, always needs validation. But character asks for nothing. Character is built in silence, in repetition, in the decisions no one sees but that define who you are when the world falls apart. And that kind of wealth, the inner kind, is what makes you unbreakable. No matter how many times circumstances shift, you are always ready to respond with firmness. Possessions can give you comfort, but virtue gives you power, a power that is not flaunted but demonstrated. The power to remain calm when everyone else panics. The power to choose with precision when others react in desperation. The power to say no when something threatens your peace. The power to walk away when something does not honor your path. Such power cannot be bought. It is trained. Marcus Aurelius knew this. His empire did not make him strong. His inner clarity, his sense of duty, his mastery over himself did. That was his real throne, not the one he inherited. Think about all the things you have tried to obtain in your life. Money, stability, recognition, security. Now ask yourself, how much of that depends on external factors you cannot control? How much of that could disappear overnight? How much of that has forced you to sacrifice your peace? The Stoics did not reject possessions. They rejected the idea that possessions define your worth. Because when you believe your identity lies in what you have, you live in a prison built from the fear of losing it. But when you invest in virtue, something changes. Your axis becomes internal. Your decisions become firmer. Your vision becomes broader. Your life begins to organize itself from a root that cannot be uprooted, because virtue is not a moral pose, it is a survival strategy, a strategy that makes you resistant to chaos, immune to disorder, capable of remaining whole even when everything around you collapses. And here arises the deepest question of this lesson. What are you actually building when you invest your time, your energy, your money? Are you raising a facade or a fortress? The facade can impress, but it falls with the first strong wind. The fortress needs to impress no one, because it exists to hold you. The facade demands admiration. The fortress demands to be inhabited. And only virtue can turn your mind into a true inner fortress. The world pushes you to consume. Stoicism invites you to build. The world urges you to show. Stoicism teaches you to be. The world sells you goods. Stoicism gives you tools so you are not dominated by them. And when you truly grasp this, you no longer seek wealth to feel valuable. You seek wisdom to be free. Invest first in your virtue, and everything else will fall into place. Because when you change, your relationship with money changes. Your relationship with consumption changes. Your relationship with pleasure changes. Your relationship with loss changes. Your entire life changes. Because you finally understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Your mind takes the shape of what you persist in. Persist in virtue, and the entire world will stop intimidating you." 12th Stoic lesson: your worth does not rise or fall with the market. Some ideas arrive in your life like silent blows, not because they hurt, but because they reveal something that had always been there. For years, you were convinced that your worth was something measurable, comparable, quantifiable, even depreciable, as if you were just another asset on the world's market. You were told you were worth more if you earned more, worth less if you lost. That your importance depended on productivity, efficiency, results, deliverables, performance. And without noticing, you began living as if your identity were trading on an emotional stock exchange that rose and fell with other people's opinions, circumstances, successes, or failures. But Stoicism delivers a radical message that breaks that illusion. Your worth does not move with any of that. It cannot rise, it cannot fall, it cannot change, because you have no price. For the Stoics, tying your worth to anything external was a form of slavery. Everything external, money, reputation, recognition, status, is unstable by nature. It depends on factors you will never fully control. It depends on decisions that won't always be yours. It depends on other people's interpretations, their biases, their expectations. And if you allow your inner worth to be defined by something that's volatile, you live on a roller coaster that never stops. The Stoics refused to get on that ride. They preferred to build their lives from a fixed point, that could not be touched by anything that didn't come from their own virtue. Imagine losing your job, your business, your project, or your income. Most people feel their self-worth fall alongside that loss. But for a Stoic, an economic setback is not an identity setback. It is merely a shift in circumstances. Because your character, your discipline, your temper, your clarity, your ability to adapt, your integrity remains intact. Which means you can rebuild anything as many times as needed without losing yourself in the process. A person who understands this can go through crisis without breaking inside. They can lose what they have without losing who they are. Society has taught you that money amplifies your value. But the Stoic truth runs deeper. Money does not change who you are, it reveals it. If you are disciplined, wealth will amplify that discipline. If you are impulsive, wealth will magnify your impulsiveness. If you are generous, money will enhance that generosity. If you are selfish, it will make it obvious. Money does not define you, it exposes you. And that is why the Stoics remained immune to its influence. They knew that the essence of a human being cannot be bought or sold, only cultivated. Marcus Aurelius lived in a palace, surrounded by power and opulence, yet constantly reminded himself that none of it truly belonged to him, that it could all vanish in an instant, that the only real wealth was virtue, that the only real security was inner mastery, that the only real freedom was not depending on anything external to be at peace. And if an emperor could live without being enslaved by privilege, how could you not live without being enslaved by money? Think of the times you felt less for not having what others have, the times you compared yourself to someone else's financial progress, the moments you judged yourself for not being where you should be according to standards you didn't even choose. And now ask, what part of you speaks when you say those things? Your essence or your ego? Your essence does not compete. It does not compare. It does not measure its worth by results. Your essence knows you already have worth, even when the world does not notice it. The Stoics knew that true wealth is the kind you cannot lose. Your character, your wisdom, your emotional mastery, your inner freedom. Everything else is a loan, a temporary loan that life can revoke at any time. That is why they refuse to attach their dignity to anything external. And that is the core teaching of this lesson. If your worth changes when your circumstances change, then it was never really yours. It was granted by something outside of you and will be taken by something outside of you as well. But when you decide that your worth depends on nothing external, something extraordinary happens. You reclaim your freedom. You can work without anxiety, grow without comparison, win without ego, and lose without collapse. You can make decisions based on what is right, not what will make you look successful. You can move forward without fear, because nothing that happens outside can threaten the wealth you built inside. And here comes the deeper question. What would happen if, starting today, you stopped evaluating your life in economic terms and began evaluating it in terms of virtue, discipline, character, clarity, purpose? How much freer would you feel? How much more peace would you experience? How much further could you advance without the weight of judgment? How much more resilient would you be, even on your worst days? The 12th Stoic lesson reminds you of something the world tried to make you forget. Your worth does not fluctuate. It is not negotiable. It cannot be bought. It cannot be lost. It does not depend on your salary, your possessions, or your material success. Your worth is intrinsic, immutable, irreducible. And when you understand that, deeply understand it, money returns to its proper place, a useful tool, but never a master. Because a Stoic never has a price, and neither do you. There comes a moment at the end of any real reflection when you are no longer listening to a podcast, you are listening to yourself. And if you've reached this point, it is not by chance. Something within you, something you may have ignored for years, began awakening as you moved through these lessons. Not an emotional awakening, but one far deeper, an awakening of dignity, of freedom, of identity. Because although this episode was about money, what is actually happening here has nothing to do with numbers. It has to do with you, with recognizing that for far too long, you allowed your worth to depend on external forces you never controlled. And today, for the first time in a long time, you are seeing with clarity something that can change your entire life. You have no price. Pause. Breathe. Feel the weight of that sentence. It's not motivation. It's not poetry. It's the essence of Stoic thought. Everything that can be bought can be lost. Everything that can be measured can be manipulated. Everything that can be evaluated can be downgraded. But what you are, your character, your will, your resilience, your ability to rebuild, your clarity to choose what's right, even when no one is watching, none of that can be bought or taken. And when you understand this, truly integrate it into your bones, your mind, your spirit, your relationship with money changes forever. You no longer live to acquire it. You use it, manage it, respect it. But you never bow to it. Think of how many decisions you've made out of fear of losing money. How many injustices you tolerated because the pay was good. How many opportunities you didn't pursue out of fear of leaving so-called stability. How many nights you wasted worrying about something that never defined who you were. And now ask yourself, what would have happened if from the beginning you had understood that your worth was never at stake? How many choices would have been different? How many chains would you have refused? How much life would you have recovered? Because here lies the most striking truth of all. Slavery to money doesn't begin when you have too little or too much. It begins when you believe your essence depends on it. That is where freedom breaks. That is where fear begins. That is where you start tolerating inner disorder. But today, after walking through every word, every idea, every honest blow we have explored together, you know you can no longer see money through your old eyes. You can no longer treat it as a god, fear it as an enemy, or worship it as a savior. Money is a tool, not identity. A resource, not a route. A bridge, not a destination. Maybe now you understand why the Stoics could walk calmly through losses that would destroy others, why they could remain centered when fortune turned against them, why they could sleep peacefully even in uncertainty. It wasn't because they were cold. It wasn't because they were indifferent. It was because they never confused their worth with their circumstances. And you are beginning to do the same. You can feel it in your breath steadier, in your mind clearer, in your chest firmer, in your inner gaze no longer hiding behind fear disguised as prudence. Look at yourself now. You are not the same person who began this episode. Something new is emerging within you, an understanding that can restructure your entire life in a way no external wealth ever could. You decide your worth, not the market, not your job, not your salary, not your possessions, not your losses, not your achievements, you. And when you decide your worth, everything else falls into place effortlessly. So let me leave you with one final image, one last truth to imprint in your mind. Imagine standing before a table where life has placed everything that once worried you. Money, stability, work, debts, expectations, and there you are, looking at all of it with a calm you've never felt before. And in that instant, you understand that none of it has power over you. You decide what it means. You choose how you respond. You set the limit. You determine the real value. And in that silent moment of clarity, you finally reclaim what has always been yours, your inner freedom. Never forget this. Money can change your life, but not your essence. It can improve your surroundings, but not your spirit. It can give you comfort, but not dignity. It can give you access, but not purpose. Money serves, but it does not rule. And when you truly understand that your worth does not rise or fall with anything external, something within you becomes invincible. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, if you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.